Hi everyone and welcome to a new video on the CBI channel. In this tutorial series we're creating a Django and React dashboard application in which users can see different visualizations based on database data. This is not the first video in this series. In fact, we've already completed 5 before, in which we focused on the React and Django setup. We've enabled page navigation and created a nice looking navigation menu. We created our database models inside of our database and added some data. And we showed you how you can bring your data from the backend database to the frontend. In this video, we're going to continue and we're going to visualize our database data into a pie chart with Material UI charts. The objective of this video is to display the quantities across different branches of our data on the React.js frontend. And that's going to look something like what you see on the screen right now. Now, to create this chart, we're going to be following 7 main steps. We're going to start by installing Material UI charts and adding a pie chart to our project. Then we're going to be formatting our page so that the chart is in the correct place and everything looks nice. Next, we will get our backend data in the right structure so that our chart can actually receive it and we can connect that data to the pie chart. Then we're going to slightly format our pie chart by adding some data labels, see how we can add percentages and also add the interactive animation so that it looks nice for the user. Now in this video, we're using Material UI charts, and Material UI charts is part of Material UI X, and it is a fast and extendable library of chart components. And if we take a look at the documentation, you can see that they have various charts already available, such as bar charts, but also other components such as line charts, pie charts, scatter charts, and even in the future, more are planned. So you can see that more will come shortly. Now in this video, we're going to be focusing on the pie chart specifically, and we're going to add this to our project. Now, if we go on the left-hand side and click on Getting Started, you can see that we need a few things before we can kick off. We need the package of npm install mui/xcharge, and we also need all of these installs for Material UI. Now, if you've not done these already, please do them inside of your project. We don't need to do this because we already covered this in an earlier video. But we do need the install of xcharge. So we're going to copy over this command, and inside of our project, I'm going to open a terminal and cd into our frontend. And in there, we do the install of mui/xcharge. And the install is now complete. Now, getting these Material UI components inside of our project is very easy. We can go to the pie chart section and then go to the overview. And in here, they already have plenty of examples that we can just copy and paste and add to our project. Now, we want to start with a basic example. So I'm going to go to the basics one and expand the code of this chart. And then we can just make sure that we have JavaScript selected and copy over everything that is in here. Now inside of our project, we can go to the frontend folder, and inside of the components folder, I'm going to add a new folder called charts, just so everything is a little bit more separated. And in there, I'm going to create a new file called pychart.jsx. And let's also make sure that chart is spelled with a capital. Now in there, I'm just going to paste in the code from Material UI and then make sure that we call this function myPyChart. And let's save this now. Now let's see what this actually looks like inside of our application. So let's go to dashboard1.jsx. And in there, we can import myPyChart from the charts and then PyChart. And for now, we can just say that in here we have my pie chart. And that should just display the chart as on Material UI inside of the dashboard 1 page of our application. So let's start our front-end server by doing npm run dev. And actually, we're also going to do a plus and do cd into our backend, and then do venv/scripts/activate, and also start our backend server with python manage.py run server, just so that we don't get an error from the API. Okay, and when we now open our project, we can see that the chart appears inside of our app. However, it is centered completely in the middle and we don't have any styling going on right here. And if I inspect this right here and I go to the middle part, you can see that it doesn't use the complete width of our application. So let's make a small adjustment right there. So inside of our front end, we're first going to go to our app.css file, and we're just going to get rid of everything that has been written there because we don't really need it. And when we now take a look at our front end, you can see that it has changed from the middle all the way to the left because there's no styling going on whatsoever. Next, we can go to the index.css file, which also has a lot of styling. And we're going to get rid of everything except for the font weight, line height, and the font family. And inside of the body, we're just going to make sure that this is HTML, body. We're going to have a margin of 0. And then we want to have a height of 100%, like this. And then we would also have a padding which is equal to 0 because we don't want to have any padding right now. And if we now take a look and inspect here, we should see that it covers the entirety of the screen. And it indeed does. So this is already much better. Now I want to place this chart inside of a nice looking box. And I want that box to be able to display 3 different charts side by side. And also make sure that when I make the page smaller, the graphs move over a little bit so that the user can still see some content. So let's do that right now. And we're actually going to create a new component for that. So we're going to do a plus and call this chartbox.jsx. And in here, I'm just going to copy over everything from our pie chart and just delete everything in the return statement. Just make it a block like this. And then we're going to call it my chart box instead of the pie chart. And we don't actually need the pie chart anyway. So let's save this. Now I also already want to put the chart box on the screen. So I'm just going to import it in this file as well. And I'm just going to place this one above the my pie chart so that we can see what happens when we apply some styling here. Now the idea of the chart box is that we have some grids and some boxes that nicely display the different charts. So the first thing what I will do is I'm going to import grid from MUI and material, and I'm doing a comma and also going to import box because those are the things that we will need to create this. Then we're going to start with one grid at the beginning, and on that grid we're going to apply some styling. So firstly we say that this is going to be a container, so it knows how to behave, and then we do SX and is sign and 2 times the square brackets to indicate that the width of this container needs to be 100%. And also we want it display to be equal to flex so that it can be a little bit more responsive. And let's set the min height of this one to 200 pixels so that we actually see something on the screen when we go to our front end. And then as some additional styling, I want the outline of the box to be a shadow. So we're going to do box shadow and set that to 3. And I want all of the items that I'm going to place inside of this container to be evenly divided. So we'll do justify content and set that to space evenly. And now, if I save this, we should see a new box in our dashboard 1 with some shadow around it. And you can see that we now have this box. And we now need 3 different boxes inside of this to make sure that we can have 3 different charts inside of there. Inside of this main grid, we're going to create 3 separate grids. So let's do that right now. Where we have grid, and let's copy that over another grid. And then as a last one, we have another grid. Now, for these grids, we also want to apply some nice looking styling. And we also want to make this a little bit responsive. So let's try it for the first one and apply some styling and then just copy it over for the other ones. So for this grid, I'm going to say that this is an item. And we're going to say if the screen is extra small, then we want the width of this to be 12, and 12 actually equates to 100% in Material UI breakpoints. When the screen is small, we also want it to be a width of 12. When the screen is medium, this box can actually be a width of 6, so 50% per box. But when the screen is large, then we want the box to be 1/3 of the screen, and that's going to be 4. And this is all going to make sense in a minute. Now, for these boxes, we can also apply some other styling with the SX component again, and do that with some 2 curly brackets. And again, say that the min height is going to be equal to 200 pixels, just to make sure that we see something at the beginning. We can add some padding so that we have some space around it available as well, and set that to 20 pixels. And then I'm just going to add a background color for a minute, just to show you guys what it looks like when we now do this. So let's say that the background color for this one is going to be equal to red. And then we can copy over this part and also apply it to my other grids. But then I'm going to state that the color of our second grid is going to be blue, and the next one is going to be purple. And now on our page, we see 3 different boxes. And if I make the screen smaller, you will see that the breaking points that we've defined is going to make it go to the next row if it becomes too small. So based on the width of the screen, it moves down. And that is exactly what I want for my charts. Now, of course, we want to place the charts inside of here. And we also want to display a nice looking title and an icon so that we can indicate what the chart is actually doing. So for the first grid, we're going to test that out right now and see what it needs to look like. So inside of this grid, I'm going to create 2 boxes. The first box is going to contain our icon and a title. And the second box is going to contain our actual chart. Now we want to pass in the right title and the right chart in our dashboard 1 right here. So to make sure that is possible, we can use props so that we can actually tell later on in our dashboard 1 what we want to see there. So what I can do on the box right here is that inside of this box, we are going to have 2 other boxes. And in these boxes, I am going to add some props. So here I want them to define icon 1. And in here, I want to define our title 1. And then inside of this box, I want to define the chart 1. So now we can pass in these things from our dashboard 1. Now to actually arrange that, we need to mention them on the top here. So we can define that a constant is going to be equal to icon 1, title 1, and chart 1. And that is equal to props. And then we just can pass props in here. And it basically states that this function expects us to provide an icon 1, a title 1, and a chart 1. And those things that we pass in are going to appear here, here, and here. So let's save this right now, go to our dashboard 1, and then actually say what we want to pass in here. So it expects an icon 1. It also expects a title 1. And lastly, it expects a chart 1. Now, the chart 1 is easy. We can just do my pie chart that we've just created and pass it in here. For the title, I can say, this is my title. And for the icon, we can quickly look up an icon on Material UI. So in the documentation of Material UI, we can look for icons. In here, it will say that you need to install something, but we already did that in the previous video. So if you've not watched that, please install this. And then we can take a look at what we want to see. Now we are going to visualize different branches. So I'm just going to say store, and we are going to get this nice looking store right here and copy this. And then inside of the dashboard 1 file, we're just going to paste in this and say that we want the icon to be the store icon. So let's save this. And when we now go into our application, you can see that we have our chart inside of this box. And we also have this stuff right here. Now, a few things that I want to change. I want the title to be next to this store and also to be bold. And I want a little bit more space below it so that it is complete in visualization. And what I would also like, if these colors are gone, is to have a nice looking border on the right hand side to separate the charts a little bit. So let's complete our final bit of styling. Inside of our chart box right here, we need to make some changes. Now let's start with the styling of the icon and the title. Now in the top box for the icon and the title, I'm going to do SX again, do an equal sign, and then do some of the square brackets. And we can say that we want to have a margin bottom for the title and say that we want to have 20 pixels underneath this icon and title to be empty. So we have a little bit more space. Then I can also say that the font weight is going to be equal to bold so that the title is actually bold. And then as a last step, I can make sure that they are going to be next to each other. And we can do that with display being equal to flex again. And then flex direction can be equal to row. And that should put them on the same height. Now, one thing I will also add is align items to make sure that they're horizontally aligned. And we can put that in here for center. And let's save this and see what it looks like. Now in our front end, we can actually see that these are aligned nicely. I just want to have a little bit more space between the icon and also between the title. And I also want to add a little bit more space on the bottom right here and also the border here. Inside of this box here, we can again add some SX, do an equal sign and two square brackets, and say that the icon must have some margin, but this time some margin on the right. And let's put that on 15 pixels. And now there's a little bit of a gap right there. Then we can also say that we want to have some margin bottom in the chart. So let's just copy over this statement of the margin bottom and then save that as well. And now we can see that we have some more margin on the bottom. And for this whole item, we can add some border on the right-hand side. So we need to apply that to this grid right here. And to do that, we can just say that we want to have border right. And then we need to say what style it needs to be. And we can say that we want to see 1 pixel. And I can then say the word dotted. So that's going to be dotted. And then we need to supply the color. Now I want it to be a little bit light gray, and I've already looked up the color code, which is D3D3D3. And let's save this. And when we now go back, it looks nice. You can see a little bit the dotted line, but we still have these annoying background colors in here. So let's remove this background color here. Now we also need to apply this styling in the other grids. So what I can do right now is just copy over this entire grid, because it's all going to be the same basically, and paste it in here, and also do it for this one. But now we want to give each of these grids their own content, because we don't want it to be the same content 3 times. So I can say that this will be icon 2, title 2, and chart 2, and this can be icon number 3, title number 3, and chart number 3. And now we only need to make sure that those are also mentioned right here. So we can just paste them over and say icon number 2, title number 2, and chart number 2. And do that one more time, but say it's chart number 3, title number 3, and then icon number 3. Now we don't actually pass in any props right here. So it's just going to show us the populated first one and a nice styling on the rest. And if we now take a look at it, we can see that the styling in our dashboard 1 looks quite nice. So that is the second step complete. So now it's time to connect our database data to this chart right here. Now if we take a look at our pychart.jsx file, you can see that it expects an ID, a value, and a label. So that's actually what we also need to provide to the pie chart, but then through an API. Now in the last video, I already showed you how we can bring data to our front end, and actually we have that right here, but this data is super detailed and doesn't fit the structure that we need at all. Now inside of our pie chart, I want to visualize this data, but only all of the unique branches with all of the unique quantities. What this should represent, each label should be a branch and each slice should refer to the actual value. And if we take a look inside of our database, you can see that if we browse our data, we have a table called supermarket sales. And from there, we only need the branch, which is specified as the branch ID, and then the quantity field. So we need to only get the branch value. We then need to get the name of the branch and sum up the quantity that we have. And it also limits the data that we bring to our front end, which is going to be better for the performance. Let's start by defining a new view set for this, because the list that we want to bring to the front end is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to copy over the supermarket sales view set and let's name that the branch data view set. And the permission classes are going to be the same. The query set can also be the same. It doesn't really matter. And our serializer, we are going to change that later on, but let's just leave it there for now. Now let's first worry about the structure of the data and what it is going to be looking like. Now, our query set is going to be a little bit different because we don't want to display all of these supermarket sales, but only one of the columns. So I'm going to change supermarket sales.objects.all to supermarket sales.object.values. And in there, I'm going to state that we're going to be looking for branch, because that is the field where our branch is in. But I also want to get the name field from the foreign key table, because each of the branches have a name which is defined in a separate table. And if I just take branch, I will get the ID. Now, if we go to our view, we can get that branch name by just doing branch and then underscore name, because that takes a look at our foreign key table and gets the name column. So now, if we would return data, we would get the ID of the branch, which is something we would need, because that's also right now inside of our front end and then inside of the pie chart, because it has an ID, a value, and a label. So ID and label are now complete. But we also need the total sum of the quantity attached to it. So to get that, we can do some of these slashes and then go to the next row. And in there, I can use an annotate function. And annotate allows us to sum up certain things. So we can state here that a field called quantity is going to be equal to the total sum of the quantity. Now to use sum, we need to use an import from Django. So we can do from django.db.models, and we can import sum. So in here, we can say that quantity is equal to the total sum to the field of quantity inside of our database. And then we can say that we also want to serialize it like this, because we want to serialize our query set using the serializer specified right here. Now, the thing is, we changed the structure of our data quite a bit, because we're just having one value and a quantity field. But our current serializer is a model serializer. And we actually don't need that, because it's not just going to serialize the model, but also make some changes. So we're going to be creating a new serializer. So we can say class of the branch data serializer, which is going to be equal to serializers.serializer. Now, we are not going to use a model serializer, so we don't need to actually mention which models we're going to be using or which fields. We can just define what we want to serialize. If we take a look at our pie chart, it expects an ID, a value, and a label. So what we can do in our serializer is say we have an ID, which is going to be equal to a serializers.integer field. And then we need to specify that the source of this information is going to be a field named branch. And that is also correct in our view because you can see that we get a value of branch, which will be an ID. Then we will also have a label. And for the label, we want to use the name field of the branch. So we do serializers dot car field because it's going to be a character field. And we say that the source of this is actually the field named branch underscore underscore name because that's where we want to get the name from. Now we also have a value field, and that value is going to be serializers dot integer field, and the source is going to be a field called quantity. And reason for this that in our views we have named it quantity. And then we can, in our view set of the branch, say that the serializer class is actually our branch data serializer. Now the last thing that we also need is a new URL because we have not actually specified where we can find this data. So in the URLs, we can copy over what we did in the previous video and register another route and just say that this is our branch data. It comes from our branch data view set, and let's call this branch data. So let's now start our backend server, and I think it's already running, and see what we see in the backend URL. So you can now see when we open this that we have a second link for branch data. And when we click on it, you see that we actually have an ID, a label, and a value. And this is exactly the structure that our pie chart is going to be expecting. So now we have our data available in the backend and it's nice and aggregated. So we only have 3 records that we need to display inside of our chart. So now we need to replace the current data that we have, which is just some hard-coded data, with the data from our backend. So let's make some changes in our code. Doing this is actually quite easy. We can just go to our pie chart and say that instead of data, which is hard-coded right here, we're going to be expecting the data to be provided in a prop. And we say that this is going to be called my data. Now on the top here, we can also then say that the function of my pie chart expects my data to be provided. And then we can go to our dashboard 1 and we need to make sure that we can set the my data one in the my pie chart to the data that we have in the backend. Now in the previous video, we've already fetched data before with the Axios instance. All we need to do to get the right data is simply change the supermarket sales extension to the URL that we just created, which is the branch data. So we can copy over branch data, go to our dashboard 1 and say that we want to fetch the branch data. And we're just going to then rename the constant to my branch data and set my branch data. And then make sure that the set my branch data is also mentioned here. And then log in the console the my branch data. And then all we need to do is go into my pie chart and in there state that my data is equal to my branch data. So here we fetch our branch data and put it in my branch data. And then we tell our pie chart that the data that it can expect is actually that my branch data constant. In our pie chart, you can then see that we have the data being equal to my data. So it's being passed in here. And now we should see the right results in our frontend. So in our backend URL, we see that the values should be 1859 and 8020 and 1831. And if we now go to our front end and we refresh the page, you can see that the labels have been set as A, B, and C, and the values actually match the values that we have inside of our backend. So we've now successfully passed our database data to our pie chart. Now the title is no longer correct because we are displaying our branch data, or actually the quantities per branch. So let's go to our dashboard 1 page and change the title to quantities per branch so that it's a little bit more descriptive, and this looks just fine. So we've now successfully established a nice looking pie chart with our database data, but I also want to show you how to apply some styling and make some changes to this. And to illustrate that, we're going to be adding some data labels to the pie chart. I'm going to show you how we can get percentages on this and also how we can make an interactive animation so that it looks nice when the user hovers over it. So let's get started with the data labels. And to add the data labels to our pie chart, we can go to the piechart.jsx file. And in there, we're going to make a few changes. We're going to start by adding the actual label to our overview. And to do that, we can add a new attribute in the series part, and we can say arc label. And then we can set that equal to a function. So we do some round brackets and specify item. And then after that item, we do an arrow function and some backward commas. And within the backward commas, we can define what we want to see in the label. So as an example, I can do a $sign and some squirrely brackets, and then define that I want to see item.value inside of the different pieces of that pie. And this is going to take a look at our data attribute and use the value column as the label on the screen. And when we now get back to our front end, you can see that we have the value of the quantity actually inside of our pie chart. Now, if we want to format that and give it a little bit of a different color, we can also do that from here. So we're going to import something called PyArch label classes. And this is going to get the classes that the labels are being used so that we can format them. And then underneath the series, we can do sx equal to, and then some squarely brackets. And in there, we can define the logic to format our data labels. To do that, we can open some square brackets and do some backwards commas, an and symbol, and then do a $sign and some squarely brackets. And in there, we define the PyArch label classes .root. And then after the square brackets, we can do a colon and some squarely brackets and define some styling. What I can do, for example, is set the fill equal to white. And I can also do the font size and set it to 14 to make it a little bit different. And when we now return, you can see that we have the values in here, but now it is formatted in a white color. So that's how you can manipulate that. Now, what if we don't want to have the value inside of here, but maybe we want the percentage of the total pie? Now, to do that, we actually need to have the percentage, and we can go to our backend to calculate it and bring it to the front end. So inside of our code, we can go back to the backend and then to the view where we are defining what we want to bring to the front end. And in here, we need to make the calculation of the quantity of each of the branches divided by the total quantity overall, because that's what we want to achieve. Now we can do that quite easily. We can first start by defining a total sum of everything that is inside of our database in terms of quantity. And that is going to be equal to supermarket sales, and then .objects.aggregate, because we're going to aggregate some data. And then we can say that we want to know the total quantity, which is going to be equal to the sum of the field called quantity. And this is now going to generate a dictionary with a total quantity label and then the sum of the quantity. Now, we don't actually want a dictionary, but we want to have the real value. So to get the real value, we can do total underscore quantity underscore value and say that we want to see the total underscore sum. And then from the total sum, we want to get the value of the column called total quantity, because that's what we name it. And by doing it like this, we only get the quantity and not the whole dictionary. Now inside of this query set, we need to make a calculation of the quantity divided by the total quantity, and then times 100. And we're going to add another annotate beneath our query set to make that happen. But before we do that, we need to make some imports to make sure we can do the calculation successfully. So from django.db.models, we're going to be importing not only sum, but also f, func, value, and float fields. And then from django.db.models.functions, I'm also going to import cast. And the reason for this is that In the end, we want to have the output as a decimal field, but all of the other things right now are floats. So I need to be a little bit creative with how I do this calculation. So we're just going to do some slash over here, and then we do another dot annotate, and we're going to name this field percentage. So we're going to do that right here. Now our percentage is going to be a function, so we do func and then add some round brackets where we can wrap our function in. Now in this function we need to divide the quantity that we've already created by the total quantity value so that we get a percentage. Now to refer to the quantity column that we've already created here, we need to do an f and then specify quantity. And that's going to take a look at the earlier created column. Now we are going to divide this then by doing this through the total quantity value. And then we're going to wrap this all around like this. And after that, do it times 100 to get the percentage value. Now, what we also are going to specify is do a comma and then set that the value needs to be equal to 2 decimals. And then we can do function is equal to round, which is going to make sure that it's rounded off with 2 decimals. And in the end, we can specify that the output underscore field is equal to a float field, like this. Now we have the field percentage created right here, but we still need to pass it to our serializer to get it to our front end. To do that, we're going to go to our serializer.py file, and we're going to say that this field is just going to be called percentage. And then we say that this is a serializers.decimal field. And we say that the max digits of this field is going to be equal to 10. And the decimal places that we expect to see is going to be equal to 2. Now let's see if we save this and we start our backend server again, if this is going to show the right values. So we do Python manage.py run server, and let's check out the results. And we actually see 0.00, so something is going wrong in this calculation. So just to be sure, we're going to go back to our views.py file, and in there we're also going to cast the quantity as a float field. So what I'm going to do is add another set of round brackets around the F1, and here state that we're going to cast quantity and then mention that this is also going to be a float field. And let's save that. And now when we get back, it actually shows the right percentage. Now the reason that I want to have 2 decimals is because all of the numbers are going to be really similar to each other. And like this, we can actually see the distinction. Now to add that percentage to our label, we can go back to our pie chart and then state that the label is going to be equal to item.percentage. And we can then even say that we want to have a percentage sign on the end. And now when we get back, we can see that we have the nice looking percentages available inside of our chart. Now the last thing that I want to add is a nice looking effect that when we hover over this chart, it is going to zoom in and make sure that the rest is no longer as prominently visible as the thing that we've selected. To do that, we can go back to our code and to the pychart.jsx file, and we can just add a few different props right here. So we can say highlight scope, and that is going to be equal to some squarely brackets where we say that faded is global, and then with some parentheses like this, and that highlighted is actually equal to item. And now when we go to our front end and we hover over one of the items, you can see that it highlights the one that we actually have and it fades out the rest. Now the last thing that you want to do is go to faded and set some styling for that. And we can do inner radius 30 and the additional radius minus 30, and then the color of gray. And then it needs to be wrapped around these squirrely brackets instead of the round ones. And we also need a comma right here. And if we now go back to the front end and we highlight it, it actually is grayed out. And that is exactly what we're looking for. Now that is all for the video of today. In the next video, we're going to continue and I'm going to show you how we can create a donut chart with different data displayed on our front end. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.